Worldwide, Tinder is the most popular dating app by a long shot. And with that means that by a long shot, the following information applies more and more so to more and more people. Because we are in an age where people are increasingly relying on social media to make those real life connections. And the information that I'm referring to is the fact that men have reported that they feel as if they receive far less messages than they send out. That is, they report not getting enough messages and are 5 times less likely than women to report so. And I suppose when we get into the nuance of things, this actually makes quite reasonable sense. The vast majority of Tinder users are men. Of the 75 million active monthly users, 75% of them are men. The gender imbalance on Tinder and on dating apps in general is something that needs to be spoken about more honestly and I think more bluntly. It's quite clear from data that this gender imbalance is substantial. But when it comes to the emotions, the vulnerability, and the sensitivity of your average Joe trying to make it on Tinder, those sorts of things don't really apply to the individual and on the individual level. That is, nuance and rationality in this sense don't matter. And again, I have to say that this makes sense. The internet fixates on and sexualization, and this is especially so on social media platforms. The easiest way to make a quick buck is to appeal to the most base and most simple of human instincts. The food industry tapped into this via sugar, and social media platforms are doing this by tapping into our basis of instincts via image-based content. Looks are everything, and with that, an increasing appreciation that attractiveness and your appearance can make or break your dating prospects. And all you need to do is scroll through Tinder or Instagram or any of its subsidiaries and you get the picture. But I think that with this, we need to appreciate that our obsession with physical appearance has skyrocketed. And this is not just among women, but increasingly more so around men in the modern world. And I would say that this obsession around physicality, especially among men online, is not just to do with our hyperfixation on image and the physical appearance via, as I said, Instagram and Tinder, but also to do with men finding themselves in a very particular and unique historical context. In the same way that modern women do, and that we have more access to our own independence and to supporting ourselves, men find themselves in a rather precarious situation. There are no longer those historically clearly defined roles and positions within society or within the private sphere, which men very clearly had. Now we are all pretty equally, although in a different sense and in different ways, confused and lost. We are lost and increasingly dissatisfied in navigating the harshness of the real world, as well as navigating the increasingly influential virtual world that is accessible to us with a mere touch of a screen. And this is another very important thing that I want to stress in this video. The internet makes it appear as if there are quick fixes to our problems, and also increasingly as if there are solutions at our fingertips, as if the world is quite literally at our fingertips. Through the internet and social media, we have access to unfettered desires that were previously either constrained or scarce. In crude terms, for a man to see a fully naked woman would take quite a lot of effort, time, and dedication. Even buying a magazine and hiding it from the rest of the household was a lot. And ultimately, it was still scarce because you had the same images in your collection. Now, type in 4 letters to your Google search bar and you're good to go. Adult content online racks in more annual revenue than Netflix, Twitter, and Hollywood combined. And this is really, literally a historical moment. For the first time in history, people other than the richest and most extravagant kings have unconstrained access from an increasingly younger age to their most outlandish sexual and personal desires. What previously could only be imagined and fantasized is now a click away and subsumed by profitable content galore. The effects of this in a general societal and data-intensive sense have not wholly been seen as of yet, but But based on just anecdotal evidence and personal experience, I can say that you're seen as a sexual prude if you don't let a man strangle you or tie you up. But we most definitely have not evolved socially or psychologically to deal with the exacerbated amounts of visual content that is put out to us daily. And this is especially relevant when it comes to our self-esteem and self-image. If you haven't heard of LOOKSMAXXIng, don't worry, neither had I until a few months ago. In short, I would say that it is a direct consequence and outcome of everything that I've outlined in the intro to this video. Because one thing that social media has most definitely contributed to and opened discussions around is the phenomenon of lookism. That is prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's physical appearance. And to be blunt, when it comes to average or below average looking people, when it comes to conventional beauty standards, that is the majority of us mere mortals, being inundated with not only exceptionally attractive individuals, but being told that we could potentially be those people with enough effort and the right information. It is no wonder that communities online are captivated by the language of maxing, especially when this is increasingly being marketed and promoted as the only viable way to get the life and success that you want, which you see all your favorite influencers having. All the LOOKSMAXXIng in the world isn't going to help you if you don't have a good foundation to work with. What do I mean by this? I mean that until you learn how to do the most basic of self-care, spending money on filler, surgery, falsies, fancy makeup brands, all of it will be money and time down the drain. You'll just end up frustrated and feel like you're going in circles. Before you ask yourself, why can't I look like her? You need to ask, what is it that she's doing that I'm not? Stop asking why, but rather, what can I do? Inaction leads to complacency. Are you comfortable with being complacent where you are? Or do you want to improve your quality of life? Here's the thing. The reality is that until you actually dedicate time to working out, eating right, improving your mental state, using good quality skincare and hair care products, learn how to brush your teeth correctly every day, all of the surgery, highlights, and falsies in the world won't help you level up. You need to learn your basics. Maxing is about everything physical and physical attractiveness. According to the online dating world and manosphere, it is at the root of your success or failure in the sexual marketplace. And maxing, or a lack thereof, according to these theories, are at the core of why young men today are not getting laid, and also why so many young women of today are uninterested or so picky when it comes to selecting potential mates. Because prior to the sexual revolution in the 1960s, men didn't have to care nearly as much about their physical appearance or basic hygiene. I mean, Henry VIII stank, apparently. Their value lay in their clearly defined roles as providers, breadwinners, and leaders. Access to women was far more equitable because choice and overall access was relatively scarce. And this is notably because it was inevitably offline. And therefore, maxing, or more specifically, LOOKSMAXXIng, is a universal endeavor, not just for women anymore, but for men as well. Now, Softmaxxing is the most accessible, it's also the most common, and it is the least permanent of maxing endeavors and processes. Within the communities and online spaces dedicated or centered around LOOKSMAXXIng, this is perhaps the most looked down upon form of maxing, especially by men. There's a bit of a contradiction in that it is the most looked down upon, but it is also simultaneously the least controversial. Because from a young age, young girls and women are encouraged to LOOKSMAXX because our value is, sadly, I guess, I don't know, depending on your inclination, is dependent on how we look. And I would argue that this form of LOOKSMAXXing is looked down upon, particularly by men, because it has historically been done and been centered around women and young girls. And what is meant by this form of LOOKSMAXXing being soft and not being permanent is, well, the example, for instance, of me. I would say that I personally am quite a good example of Softmaxxing. I get my nails done, I wear jewelry, I wear clothes. I brush my teeth, I wear cosmetics and makeup, I get my hair done. So at the end of the day, I take off my makeup, I take off my nice clothes, I don't care too much about my nails can come off. I am not permanently at my maximum or at my maxing level. A common way of ridiculing soft maxes online is by stating that you are essentially two different people. One when you go to bed and then the other for when you are doing your everyday activities and are in society and presenting to people. It has quite a bit to do with the phenomenon of catfishing, as well as airbrushing on social media profiles and on dating apps especially. Modern women are seen, at least by these online communities, as the ultimate soft maxes. In comparison to Softmaxxing is Hardmaxxing, and it literally means what it says. This is hard and this is permanent. Hardmaxxing means improving your appearance permanently by any means necessary. Some incels have even been known to bash in their face with a hammer continually in order to create a particular jawline, although it most commonly involves plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery. The difference between the two meaning that plastic surgery has more to do with reconstructing a face or a body in order to look more normal, whereas cosmetic surgery is about enhancing what is already there in a permanent way. Of course, in this day and age, they sort of intersect more so than anything else, especially as cosmetic procedures and plastic surgery have become more commercially available. And also as filler, for instance, becomes more popular and mainstream, it is a contentious topic in these forums as to whether such procedures that are more so semi-permanent as opposed to fully permanent are considered soft or hard maxing. Hard maxing is increasingly being promoted as a solution to men's issues on these online forums and is most notably promoted by men on these online forums. Hard maxing is obsessively spoken about on these forums, and it often intersects with other forms of maxing such as mentality maxing, money maxing, health maxing. Online, what is increasingly being seen is that teenage boys and young men are going on what is called their LOOKSMAXXING journey. There have been and still are entire forums and platforms dedicated to this. There are the more tame and regulated ones on Reddit, which cater to both men and women. For instance, r/how to be hot. This subreddit is dedicated to women and is mainly focused on soft maxing and some quasi-hard maxing, such as getting lip filler or laser hair removal. The thing with soft maxing is that it is, in theory, something that women have been doing since the beginning of time. Women are expected, especially publicly, to present a certain way, and that has required temporary enhancements and changes that have advanced women in, for instance, attracting prospective partners and being treated better. And I think the vast majority of women in the modern world are in consensus that pretty privilege is a very real thing.
Y'all want to talk about pretty privilege? I'm seeing a lot of pretty people talking about how pretty privilege isn't real and they don't fucking have it and blah, blah, blah. Shut up. No, you want to talk about pretty privilege? Talk to people who had a glow up. If they were ugly in some kind of way and now they're somewhat attractive or very attractive, whatever, they will tell you pretty privilege is fucking real. Because when you weren't attractive, it was like everything you did was like annoying. Like your presence just like pissed people off. If you asked a question, you were the biggest like irritation of life. But when you're like stereotypically attractive, like whatever, you get away with so much more. People are so much nicer to you. It is the realest shit. It's beyond me that this is even a fucking conversation. Let's be fucking for real.
However, there are forums that are not so tame and that are incredibly niche. They are not well regulated and essentially cater toward what is more so in line with the black pill community. One that is still active and, at least in relative terms, successful is LOOKSMAXXING.org. In When doing research for this video, I spent a whole day on this forum just reading, browsing, and looking at updates. Looksmaxx.org is the last out of 3 forums that were established and that established what is universally known, at least on incels and incel forums, as the PSL scale. The P stands for puahate.com, the S stands for sluthate.com, and the L stands for looksmaxx.net or .org. In short, all these forums intersected and intersect because of their focus on looks theory, lookism, and of course, inceldom. The PSL scale ranges from 0 to 8. Median attractiveness for men is equated to PSL level 4, whereas the highest level of attraction, which is basically perfection and inaccessible to any human being, is PSL level 8. Incels believe that only a handful of people can be PSL level 6 or higher. The conversations which I saw on looksmaxx.org revolved around firstly hardmaxxing and secondly whitemaxxing. I forgot to mention that there's also transmaxxing and that online forums such as looksmaxx.org are incredibly degrading and demeaning of such a what they perceive transformation. Essentially, they believe that predominantly trans women are only transitioning because they want to improve their appearance. They were unattractive as straight, or what they perceive as being straight white men, and therefore transition into beautiful, cosmetically and aesthetically pleasing white women. Threads, conversations, and discussions would often just fall into the notion that women are hypocritical and superficial. Health maxing and money maxing were also discussed, but largely with disdain. This forum, or at least the threads that I was on, tended to be quite black-pilled. There was a perception of overall hopelessness, or at least a inclination to make others feel hopeless about their situation and their problems. So health maxing and money maxing were discussed on this forum, but largely with disdain because Chads and Stacys are perceived to have it a lot easier in terms of looks and access to money because of their looks. I was privy to a discussion and thread about Ethnocels and about whether white men have it easier than men of color. Ethnocels are an intriguing phenomena. Please let me know in the comment section if you'd like me to make a separate video on this alone, because I'm very interested in ethnocels. You have 2 options when cursed with the existence of being an ethnic. Live as an incel in the West, all the while getting berated by whites for being genetically inferior, or live as a normie in your shithole of a homeland where famines, crime, civil war, riots, coups d'etats, poverty, political unrest, genocides, and diseases are rampant. Essentially, we have to choose our poison, and I honestly do see why it makes some ethnics so bitter. Another user says, also, I'm not coping. I've literally seen videos of girls saying, I don't want my kid to look like that. It's not Aryan. It's just we don't want our kid to get uglier, and Asian and black is noticeably uglier. Race pull is strong. Just look at all the ethnic women seeking white sperm for their offsprings. You're more likely to come out attractive if you're born white, as they're better looking on average than the other races. On the other hand, if you're born ethnic, you have to surpass higher, insane odds to come out good looking. The chances of coming out subhuman are too great. The black pill is, if he got skin lightening, it would triple or quadruple the Freud's IOI. Not saying it's possible, just be white applies in non-whites. Why do blacks obsess over a derogatory term for mixed race individuals? It's because they're light skinned and have more white facial features that combine with some black features for a more aesthetic look in some cases. 90% of mixed race individuals actually look worse than full blacks, lol. There was another thread that I was on in which a young man was asking rather desperately for advice on how to improve his appearance. He has a good job and success, but believes that there is room for much improvement. He appreciates and stresses that he will never be a Chad, but that there is, of course, room for improvement. Now, the only reason that I am posting this individual fellow's photos here on this channel, I am not intentionally doxing him or anything of the sort, is because I just hope that by some fluke or some will of the gods, he sees this video and sees that he is actually an incredibly attractive man physically. And just based on reading the things that he said on this forum, I feel that his confidence has been so brutally destroyed just by life, by society, by his experiences and personal perceptions of himself. And it is absolutely heartbreaking to see. Your brown eyes is your biggest failure. I think you're hard capped where you are now. You need eye ptosis repair, genio for height, deep neck lift with someone like Dr. Mike Nyack, plus a rhinoplasty. You have the wrong bones to become a Chad. It is simply not possible without facial reconstructive surgery or a skull transplant. And the OP is desperate at this point. There are good looking people with brown eyes. I know I'm not going to look like a model, that is fine. So since we know my eye color is not what is holding me back from being high tier normie or maybe even Chad light, what is it that's holding me back from that? And what can I do to correct those things? And somebody responds, the nose is what immediately caught my attention, so I'd suggest a rhinoplasty first. I agree with others about your chin, more vertical length would help. It's either an implant or a genioplasty. A chin implant is less invasive, there's a faster recovery, supposedly more predictable results. Right eye ptosis is quite noticeable, can get a correction there too. Softmaxxing. I would suggest making your eyebrows less rounded, darker, and enhance eyelashes as they can mask your ptosis a bit. Now, if this is what they are saying about a man who is exceptionally attractive and would be to, I think, any woman that he would approach in real life and talk to, converse with, and treat like an individual human being rather than a generalization, I cannot imagine what the rest of the users on this forum feel about themselves. And these users are inevitably in a non-ending cycle and self-fulfilling prophecy. Individuals who are average or normies who say that they are attractive or say that things are not as bad for them aesthetically speaking as they seem to believe are merely individuals who are gaslighting them or who would never actually really date them. And so for instance, telling this man that he is actually very attractive and absolutely fine means nothing. It merely reinforces this ideological perspective, and thus the black pill is reinforced. What is dishearteningly clear when it comes to these forums and also just to social media at large is that generalizations are held front and center.
You give an ugly guy a chance, he thinks he rules the world. I swear to God. Because they got a hot girl, they can be horrible. Like, you're still ugly, though.
There is from Twitter posts about Sniper Wolf's husband allegedly cheating on her as of late. This perception that there is a nature to men or a nature to women, that an individual example of a man cheating on his partner who is seemingly a lot more, at least conventionally, attractive than he is a demonstration that all men are scum, that all men cheat, or that, as one Twitter user put it goes to show that all pussy get boring after a certain amount of years. Just some men choose to ignore it because they love the girl, and some men step out and want variety. It's not like this is new. Men and women look for different things in life. Loyalty isn't the same per gender. And with such generalizations going front and center, increasingly more so when we increasingly delve into and become embroiled in the virtual world and space, other generalizations, other stereotypes, and other harmful conceptions of groups of individuals become front and center. As we can see, for instance, on LOOKSMAXXING.org, homophobia, transphobia, sexism, racism, anti-Semitism are all present. I also think that there is something interesting to be said about the individuals whom I at least saw, the ones who seem to be the most active on LOOKSMAXXING.org, and their profile pictures. I would argue that their profile pictures were indicative of their perception of woman. One thing that incels and many of these modern men who feature on and make a hell of a lot of money from these manosphere-esque podcasts is that they have a wholly fabricated and exaggerated perception of modern woman. And it is also one that is completely false. Because the thing is that the men who feature on these profile pictures don't want to have sex with just any woman. Just like no woman on earth wants to have sex with just any men. We can universally recognize, although not necessarily very well articulate, that attraction is important and it is very specific and particular to an individual. The thing with these men behind these profile pictures is that they want to attract a particular woman that isn't real. They are all pictures of either celebrities or porn stars or of individual men, male celebrities whom they aspire to look like. And ultimately, these profile pictures, these individuals within these profile pictures are not individuals at all. They are consumable products. From the celebrities to the influencers to the anime characters, they are marketed, edited, and presented as perfect on TikTok, Instagram, on porn sites, on OnlyFans. They are a consumable fantasy. Yet at the same time, what I noticed with these users is they want this fantasy alongside all the characteristics and traits of a traditional woman. They see their own personal looksmaxxing journey as being that which will ultimately attract these traditional, although fantastical women to them in order to reinforce their masculinity, in order to somehow give their own masculinity the identity and the meaning that it is missing in a very precarious modern context. Not only the vast majority, but all modern women will never meet that fantasy or that reality. And this is especially the case when we look at the generalizations and the lookism which subsume these communities online. These generalizations not only create unrealistic expectations for men and for women, but they also try to quantify unquantifiable things such as love, sex, making love, and of course what this entire video and situation is all about: physical and emotional or just personal attractiveness. And I don't think that these unrealistic expectations are a men's thing or men's issue or a woman's thing and issue. It is a human issue. I would say that this is fostered by our use and abuse of social media, as well as the presentation of get something quick schemes, get money quickly, hustle, as well as this hyper fixation on individual solutions to complex, all-encompassing and interpersonal problems. The depressing thing is that with these unrealistic expectations comes inevitable disappointment when those expectations are given more ground, more importance, and center stage over that of nuance and the very frightening experience of just taking a chance on something. I would also argue that the more time that we spend online and not in the real world means that our communicative skills really suffer. Just based on personal experience of going on dates, conversation has increasingly become a bit more superficial. And I think this is because online we are able to stay in communities that cater to our worldview, that cater to what we want to see and what we would nicely fashion into a world based on our rules, our regulations, the people and bodies that we want to see and engage with. The way we go onto social media and onto our subscription pages is very self-indulgent. And such self-indulgence really does not cater to us going into the world healthily. And this is especially the case for incels and for the likes of individuals who seemingly spend quite a bit of their time on looksmaxx.org. One incel described, for instance, his ideal woman: short stature but high E features like relatively big lips, big titties, fat ass, quiet, doesn't ever contradict me, listens to me vent and tells me I'm right, which I am, gives amazing blowjobs, cooks, cleans up after me, not white but light-skinned, dark hair's fine but she should dye it a lighter color, pretty face because that matters more than anything, only dresses modestly out of the house, disparages men whom I dislike and also keeps away from my friends in order to appear as non-hypergamous as possible because she knows that if I get even a whiff of a cheating I will end her. Also, occasional threesomes with other women, and she lets me cheat but just doesn't say anything because she knows I need to get my rocks off. As one poster said on LOOKSMAXXING.org a few days ago, you're doomed. And yet again, we are in a vicious cycle because increasingly so, reality is looking less and less appealing. Reality has its own growing problems and antisocial undertones. And I'd just like to end off by talking about men and plastic surgery, because I think that this is increasingly going to become a hot topic. Already on the threads that I was seeing on LOOKSMAXX sites, there were references to two doctors in particular, Dr. Ariel Rad and Dr. Douglas Steinbrecht. Because as I said, men are increasingly going under the knife. Going under the knife means that one is able to attract what is perceived as higher value women. According to incels and LOOKSMAXX communities, women's market value in the sexual marketplace is based on two things: her youthfulness and attractiveness, physical attractiveness, thus her sex appeal. This preoccupation with our physical appearance that men are increasingly becoming susceptible to, and by physical appearance I don't mean sort of everyday vanity which all humans inevitably exhibit in some shape or form, but I mean these kinds of hard-maxing techniques and propositions. We don't prepare ourselves or give enough space for that much needed grace that is necessary in order to confront the aging process, because all of us, every second of every day, are decaying. And I find this quite sad because we are living in an age where we are all more individually humanized than we have ever been in history, yet we are dismally and brutally destroying that. We are all getting old, and at this rate we are all going to be older and old people with very little in the way of individual personality and disposition. And with the fact of us getting old and ultimately getting older, we need to appreciate that things are happening a lot later. Of course, there are inevitable issues with this, such as wealth disparity and the lack of power, political power, social and cultural power and clout that young people have, especially relative to preceding generations. However, we are not helping ourselves in confronting these real-world issues by becoming impatient and entitled. And unfortunately, the modern world in which we live in does not in any way complement the very patience and grace which we need. People, especially I would say women, are waiting a lot longer for everything in life, and that is a good thing. Of course, everything comes with consequences and challenges, but we need to face them honestly and have honest conversations around them, rather than having a moral panic around things or placing blame on each other in fits of cultural warfare. We need to appreciate that we really do need each other, socially and personally, intimately. I don't know how this is going to happen. Throughout history, there have been sexual revolutions, but time is everything. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to my patrons. I'll see you very soon in the next one.